Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is to head to Turkey today for talks that he hopes will re-engage US involvement in the peace talks. Zelensky will meet with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Donald Trump's peace envoy Steve Witkoff. This comes as Ukraine once again came under attack from Russian airstrikes overnight. 32 people were reported injured in a drone strike on an apartment building in Kharkiv, and there were also strikes reported in the west of the country. Meanwhile, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said the men identified as responsible for a sabotage attack on a train on the line servicing Ukraine were two Ukrainian nationals working for Russian intelligence. The two men have not been identified and are believed to have returned to Belarus after the attack. And for more on this, we can go to France 24's correspondent Gulliver Cragg in Kharkiv. Good morning, Gulliver. Volodymyr Zelensky says he aims to re-engage US involvement in the peace talks. Are hopes high in Ukraine for this meeting with Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Steve Witkoff?
Well, I'm at one of the sites in Kharkiv that was damaged overnight. A drone hit this supermarket, as you can see. I've been talking to the people who are walking around here, starting their day, some of those taking part in the rescue or clean-up operation, rather. And as you can imagine, people are extremely fed up of these nights of sirens, of explosions, of living in fear, and would very, very much like to hope that a ceasefire is on the horizon. But if you ask them, do you see any reason to suppose that something has changed, that Vladimir Putin might now be ready for a ceasefire when he wasn't a few months ago? And they said, no, not really. I mean, some said that they really just wanted to be hopeful because they so much want it to end. But another man said to me that he didn't think Vladimir Putin would be ready for a ceasefire until he died. And I think that's actually something that a lot of Ukrainians think, even if they perhaps don't usually say it out loud. I mean, the situation on the battlefield is deteriorating for Ukraine. It seems more likely that if these rumors of the Americans having developed a new peace plan for Ukraine with these talks with Kirill Dmitriev and Steve Witkoff actually amount to something, that it might be the Russians believing that them putting more pressure on the Americans to put more pressure on the Ukrainians to give in to their demands will work better now that the Ukrainians are being forced out of at least part of the town of Pokrovsk and generally struggling very much on the battlefield, perhaps a bit more than a few weeks ago. But I don't think the Ukrainian government's position has changed at all, because they do not think that ceding the rest of the Donbass region, the part that they still control, to Russia in exchange for peace, for example, or agreeing not to join NATO or acceding to any of Vladimir Putin's other demands would really bring peace, because they think that Vladimir Putin wants basically total capitulation of Ukraine and to bring it back into the Russian orbit, something that is absolutely unacceptable for Ukrainians. And so I don't think there's much reason to be hopeful here, all the less so among most Ukrainian commentators, because their confidence in Steve Witkoff, who has reportedly been leading these new talks with the Russians, is extremely low. He displays an extremely low level of knowledge, even of basic Ukrainian geography.
Now, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said on Tuesday that the two men identified as responsible for this attack on a freight train last weekend were Ukrainian nationals working for Russian intelligence. How has that been received in Ukraine?
Well, it's not the first time that this has happened. I think Ukrainians have perhaps got other things on their mind, because they're also very much focused on the corruption scandal rocking the government. But in Poland, it is not the first time that Ukrainians have been accused of working for the Russians, for Russian secret services, on acts of sabotage. There's very much a pattern here. We don't know how the Russians managed to recruit these Ukrainian citizens. Some may simply be absolutely mercenary and doing it for the money. Others may be pro-Russian Ukrainians, but there have been fires in Polish cities that the Polish investigators have blamed on Ukrainians recruited by the Russians. And Donald Tusk said that the aim is not so much to do serious damage. The damage to the railways was very, very minimal. Actually, several trains went over the damaged part of track before they realized it was damaged. But it's to sow discontent in Polish society, to sow discontent perhaps with Ukrainians, for those who don't understand that it's actually the Russians recruiting them, and also with the Polish government in general, because there's always some reason that you can be unhappy with the government's response. And we saw that in the election campaign last year when Karol Nawrocki, Donald Tusk's opponent, won the presidency.
Thank you very much for that, Gulliver
Earlier
Cragg
this year,
in
sorry.
Kharkiv.